What is right-wing spirituality? That is the question we are going to look at today. So this might seem like something really old-fashioned. So what does it mean right now? We're not going to be exploring like the mid 20th century Germans, YouTube censored there, and we're going to see why it's not an oxymoron, why it definitely exists. So what is it versus, far right spirituality as well? Why it's not a contradiction, actually, why the right is far more spiritual than the left in many, many ways. Why this is totally needed now. You have kind of four options for people. There's more, but there's four to start. And some practical tips if you're like, hey, I want to be more spiritual, I want to explore this, real concrete stuff at the end to look at. This is something that's kind of coming out of these videos I've done on the UK Civil War, saying that religion, spirituality, people having something to fight for is really going to be a key part of that. Thanks for all the support, by the way. That video on will the Civil War be a holy war has had, I think, 50,000 hits now. It's crazy. So thank you. My own background is kind of boring, but in terms of this spiritual theme, it's something I've explored thoroughly in different ways throughout my life in different places. My mum was actually a Catholic nun for 7 years before she met my dad. She did this sort of novice period, then you can disrobe, literally. Well done, Dad. Good skills. I've done a lot of martial arts, so I've experienced sort of Zen and Taoism through then. I was fairly committed Buddhist for a while. I still meditate every day. I really know the Buddhist path. A lot of hippie stuff like conscious dance. Kind of got pagan leanings as well, which is natural in Britain. And I had several Jewish teachers, which I think has had an influence on me as well. So Throb Club is going to be another big one. So if you're here for the hour, hashtag Throb Club, you know what to do in the chat, guys. It's going to be another long one. Just a little practical thing as well. I just moved to a new house in Slovenia, wonderful country, and the echo is a bit, I haven't quite sorted out my little recording studio here, Harry Potter-esque under the stairs. So yeah, it's not quite the setup I had in England yet. So excuse the echo. All right, let's start with the question like, what is spirituality? This is not an easy question. Ken Wilber, I regard as America's greatest living philosopher, has explored this his whole life. He had like seven different definitions. I'll come to some of those shortly, but I think it bears, inquiry. Like it includes like mystery and nature and yoga and maybe psychedelics. And does it also include just like getting together with your family, or maybe it has to be religious or rituals or ethics? There's a lot there, right? Like you might ask, what is spirituality to you? To you, I think that's a valid question. To help people explore this, I've done lots of workshops on this, and I often just ask them questions rather than tell them, which I think is arrogant. I say, for example, can you be more or less spiritual? Pick any two people from history. I don't know, Gandhi and Genghis Khan was one of the more spiritual. Is it something universal or is it something regional? Do we have a regional spirituality, or is it something that connects us irrespective of background, nationality? And is it something in the body? Because my main area is embodiment, or is it something we transcend the body? Ascending and descending spirituality are both traditions that exist. Sometimes people think it's like everything and nothing. I would say it's not. I would say we can actually get a little bit more clear than that. It's not just whatever you want it to be. Yeah. Often it's connected to meaning making. My masterpiece on this, my life's work really is that video, The Inner Crusade, which didn't get so many hits, I think just algorithmically. Have a look at that if you're interested in meaning, or if you prefer John Vervaeke's 50-hour Meaning Crisis series. And I think the sort of movement away from meaning is not accidental in our world. My video on the death cults explains that, and that was definitely algorithmically suppressed for, I think, obvious reasons if you look at it. All right, so what is spirituality? This is I just Google like a bunch of memes, and love is the shortest definition of spirituality. Is it? We're gonna come to that. It seems a bit sort of easy somehow. Something about personal growth, something about connectedness. I'll say specifically later what kind of connectedness. Being a better human being. That's difficult in post-modernity where no one says anything's better or worse than anything else. Is it rational or is it post-rational? Here's some definitions. So, where do I find meaning? Where do I feel connected to what? I'll come to how should I live? So, it's a question of the why, the how. You can't really separate it out from religion. Often you hear people today say, I'm spiritual but not religious. And that's a trap. There's a sort of individual narcissism to that. You can't really be religious on your own. The communal sanity is in there. And, we need to be able to get like married, and, it needs to be ritual. This is part of life. The quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul, again, we could just go into definitions, but people have some sense of that, I think, everywhere, as opposed to material or physical things. I'll come back to that. So pause the screen if you want to look a bit more at that, but some there. So Kim Wilber, I think, sort of the master here. He talks about states and stages. So states come and go. We can have more or less spiritual states, like an oceanic oneness state, right? Like I have that many times. I can access that personally every time I go to the gym if I want to. It's fairly, I can dance my way into that, meditate my way into that, fast my way into that. These are states. I fast, I have an altered state, I eat, it goes away again. Traits or levels of development is something we've achieved as a person. So it's a way of being. It's more or less stable. We grow through those over time. So in this sense, babies get more spiritual as they grow up. Yeah, the liberal view is like you're born spiritual and pure. I'll return to that shortly. But we have growing up. So we have growing up and waking up. These have terms. These are sort of recognized in different spiritual traditions. Christian mystics, Buddhists, Hindus, etc., have mapped these fairly thoroughly. This is not it's not just random. These are things people have dedicated their life to and have mapped. And when we put states and traits together, we have this Wilbeck's lattice, this map, different types. And then, they have names like dark night of the soul or unified states. There's different names and different traditions. But actually, when mystics talk, mystics are people who are looking at state spiritual experiences. They often make a lot of sense. And where we've got to be careful with states and traits someone could be at a very low stage development, so trait developmental stage, but actually have a profound mystical experience. Yeah. So this is one thing to look at. Religion, spirituality looks different as we grow up, and it looks different as we wake up. There are practices for this, which I will come to. This is not random. There's a science of this, right? This is really not an exact science, perhaps, but there's still such a thing as grace, and people who just have I don't know, they're churning milk and they have a mad spiritual experience. It can happen, but there is an art to this, certainly. I mean, one aspect of spirituality is a mystery, right? It's even called the great mystery in some traditions. So, all the Taoists say, the way that can be talked about is not the true way. So, I mean, we should be, again, having some humility in definitions. And I think it's sort of experiential, right? It's like imagine if you had to explain the color yellow to someone who was blind from birth. That would be very tricky, but it's a very real experience for, like right now, it's colors on the screen. And it's subjective, but it's very real. Or the taste of a banana, right? It'd be very difficult to explain. It's in the tasting, as to say, sort of eat the food, don't just read the menu. I think spiritual experience is experiential. It's something you do that is experientially true. There's a truth to it experientially that is beyond words. There's difficult to define by definition. So, I don't want to get too caught up in definitions of spirituality before we ask what a right. It's kind of like You know what spiritual experience is. Yeah. If you want to get more into this, I recommend Roger Walsh. No relation, sadly. Cool guy. I've had him on my podcast a couple of times. About different types of yoga, different things for different people. His Essential Spirituality book is a really like accessible, non-left or right-wing guide, I think, to spirituality, which integrates different approaches and really down. He's easier to read than Ken in some ways. So Ken, if you're a bit more intellectual, or Roger, if you just want to guide to like what is spirituality, and it's a few things. Philosophers might call it a bucket category. Yeah. So let's go to our next thing. If we're doing definitions, we're asking what is right wing spirituality? What is right wing? Well, all right. Here's the first thing to say. By Western definitions currently, or just Western suggestions, it's 90% of the planet, and it's 99.9% of your ancestors, right? Like most of your ancestors would be considered right wing. Tribal people certainly have many aspects that would be considered right wing by kind of Western standards today. I sometimes think of my granddad, fought on D-Day. I kind of sometimes think he would just face palm at how not right wing everything was now. He would be regarded as like far right by today's liberal standards, even though he's a pretty normal guy then. So it's just normal is one definition, right? It's just normal. Unfortunately, there's this idea of progress. So this is a wonderful blag that since the Enlightenment, this idea of everything getting more and more liberal till we're in some Star Trek, Star Trek liberal heaven. as opposed to like good and evil fighting it out, the more Star Wars version, or Dune, which says, hey, actually, our conservative nature is there for a reason. And many sort of hierarchical conservative structures, or various conservative forces like religion, they're just part of us. They exist, and we need to be careful with them. And but they're part of our nature. And it's not that we just keep, it's not that we all end up as black, disabled, lesbian, trans, or something, right? We're not moving in a particular direction, and that direction is inevitably good, or that direction is inevitable. This is bullshit. Right-wing people would deny that as a concept, or I think they should, certainly. So at this point, sort of, we've had so much progress, inverted commas, that it's sort of any kind of normal family who just kind of want to live and work and live ethically and have raise a family together. Just normal people are considered, have right wing spirituality. That's certainly like where I'm in now. He's in ex-Soviet country, Eastern Europe essentially. Anyone here would be considered right wing by like the standards of California or New York, and they certainly have a spirituality. But to them, it's just like normal. It's just life. As I said, most of your ancestors. There are, however, some other definitions you can look at, like the left or right side of the aisle. Or was it the French Revolution? I don't fucking know. Different attitudes towards so many things. Again, screen pause if you want to have a look at that infographic. Different beliefs, different access to different things. Yeah, you could break it down like they look more to the past, conservatives to the future, perhaps, that it's more about meritocracy rather than equality, that it's, yeah, different aspects towards government, schooling. It's complex, right? This is the ChatGPT's definition. Right wing generally refers to political ideologies that emphasize tradition, hierarchy, nationalism, markets. See, these are quite a lot of different things. Yeah, conservative. So it's got this different, like economic liberalism, like Thatcher, might be quite different than a conservative who wants to maintain, I don't know, the Catholic Church, or a nationalist, someone who's a global skeptic, who is believing in freedom and is a bit more like a kind of anti, more libertarian kind of side of things. And is it just that they're not the left? Right. So what do all these people have in common? Like Morrissey and what's his name? Anthony Oliver, the King of Spain, Ben Shapiro, Thatcher, this is Gilders from the Netherlands. And I could put historical figures in there to make it even more wide. So, what is right wing? One definition is anything that isn't socialist, communist. It's a broad church for sure. I think one thing that's a fairly good definition is it views human nature as flawed. This is like original sin in Catholic Christian tradition, or somehow like in need of growth. We could look at it just that term. People need to learn something, in need of honing. Children need a certain amount of training. They're not little angels. If you've ever been around kids, you lose that illusion pretty quickly. That somehow human nature is not perfect. We are fallen in some way, that we have a base nature, perhaps. There's different versions of this. Like, we're sinful at heart is quite harsh, right up to sort of more just like, hey, genetics is a thing, right? We have certain talents. Like, anyone who has kids believes it becomes more conservative nearly always. And one of the reasons is if you have more than one kid, you go, oh, they're real different. They're born with a certain nature. Whereas a left view is sort of blank slate theory, which has been proven by genetics and various other studies to be completely false at this point. It's certainly not the case that we're born with a blank slate. That's a very hopeful view of the world. We can be perfected. The communists tried this. So this view of nature as not perfectible or fallen or even just different between people, like talent exists. I think that's key to being conservative. We're going to pick one thing, being right wing. It's almost a dirty word. I like Wilber's definition, which is it's right wings through the causes of behavior. So the left says, if you take like, why does someone do crime, or why is someone poor, like any question, the right would say it's personal. It's like, they made bad choices, personal responsibility, and there's the I quadrant, it's called in this model of integral psychology, that they make certain choices based on themselves. That's very different than us on the left. Someone would say, "Hey, it's society, and they're poor, and it's what is it they say now? What's the word? Systemic. Yeah, that's the word. So, and there's truth to both of these approaches, right? So ultimately, left and right can, most people who are relatively intelligent will say, well, I'm left on, I'm liberal on blowjobs and right on taxation, right? They get more complicated. It's not just one size fits all. There's an integration of these possible. You'll hear some political parties say we're not left, we're not right, we're far ahead. Yeah. I've certainly seen like people present it as three things, or as a cube, or as a pyramid, like different ways to present it. So it's not just right wing. But again, let's not try and be clever. Always the comments is like someone saying, actually, if you believe in left and right, you're an idiot. Da, da, da. I'm well ahead. Well, yes, an integral point of view, for example, takes on all of these as causes of behavior. So there, yeah, I agree. Another way of looking at it is sort of masculine and feminine. The right tends to be more masculine, tends to have an emphasis on boundaries. Particularly, you'll see this in, say, immigration debates, that the left will not have a healthy sense of boundaries. I was once joking with my friend, said, look, everyone's conservative at heart. Like, you're conservative with your body organs. You're not just going to randomly take one out. It's probably not your appendix if you whip out a body organ. Also, I said, we're conservative when it comes to our house, right? Where, I said to her, you don't let people in your house. And she said, yeah, I do. I have house parties. I'm like, yeah, we don't just let random homeless people. I said, even in your house parties, you don't let people in your bedroom. She said, yeah, I do. They all sleep in my bed. I said, okay, you don't let people in your vagina. She laughed and conceded the point that, boundaries are a good thing. And this tends to be a right wing way of looking at life, that the feminine tends to be sort of beautifully absorbing, open, let everyone in, feed everyone, nurture everyone. And the right says, hang on a minute. If we feed everyone, we feed no one. If we look after everyone else's kids, we don't look after our own kids, right? So this is where the boundaries come in. The borders is a yin and yang thing. Another thing to say here is it's being right wing is also partly just biological. Yeah, people that take testosterone who are doing, supposed gender reassignments will experience this. People who lift weights will experience it. I think Mark Zuckerberg experienced this not long ago. That when people have a chemical change, they just it's like that boundaries, that fierceness, that goal orientation, assertiveness comes in. So it's funny we justify it politically. I think a lot of it's just biological. And certainly there is a feminine quality to being on the left. You look at left-wing men, there's a feminine quality. In some ways, I think this argument is just fucking boring. I don't want to spend the entire video talking about what defines left and right wing. If you've got different views, put them in the comments. I think we kind of get it. Like, what's spiritual, what is right wing? We kind of get it, even if we don't have an exact definition, because these are bucket categories, after all. Family resemblance is sometimes called in philosophy. All right. The next thing to note is since the mid 20th century, and some would say World War One, definitely since World War Two, there's been a hyper-vigilance to anything right-wing, anything nationalistic, particularly anything ethnic orientated. The generous story here is that the reason for that is that it led to a lot of suffering, and hypervigilance is a trauma thing. When groups of people are traumatized, they tend to be extra careful of anything. So we've been extra careful, particularly like the last group of right-wing people pictured there on the left, to explicitly have a sort of spirituality, did terrible things. There's no doubt about that. So that's why this whole conversation is difficult. I think that the sort of a right-wing spirituality is being repressed in the world for various reasons. And this video tells you who by. It's four different groups, I would say. Essentially, we're in a materialistic paradigm. Materialism says there is no spirituality. The world is a dead world. This is different from an animist world. Like if you look at the Emerald podcast, that there's only stuff. Stuff is all you need. We're just stuff. Consciousness isn't real, which I find bizarre, given I'm conscious right now, and I imagine you are too. There's only stuff, and stuff makes people happy, and that's a good society. And I would say that's all lies. There's clearly not just stuff because I'm conscious. I have spiritual experiences almost every day. Stuff doesn't make people happy. There's just evidence on that beyond a certain minimum. And it's terrible for society. So this materialistic basis of society has to fight to keep its lies alive. And it does that through the consumer culture. It traps us in various types of materialism and would very much like to lead us away from spirituality, I would say, particularly a right spirituality, which takes on tradition and people and place. I'll come to. This just leads people to nihilism, right? Nihilistic consumers who need to be medicated, who are doomers. Nietzsche kind of identified this problem in what's called modernity, that we're in the era of stuff, basically. And when there's no stuff, you have nothing to believe in. This is the cause of the sort of mental health crisis, the drug addiction we see in young people, particularly the degradation of the West, the decadence we see now. It leads to hedonism. My friend Richard the Fourth just did a nice video on why Andrew Tate's materialistic because he's saying, just be hedonistic, right? It's just girls or alcohol and drugs. It's just a hedonism that you're trying to numb yourself against the horror of nihilism. So people are trying to numb themselves. They're trying to go, well, if there's no God, if there's nothing transcendent, if there's no real reality beneath this one, I might as well make the most of this one and try and deal with the pain, right? So you kind of get like consumerism itself becoming a religion. You see when people are in shopping centers, like there's a big out of town shopping center here, and I was there the other day. It was gross, man. It's just got this feeling of almost like worshipfulness around this. And you see the Christmas period, it's been replaced with a buying capitalist period, essentially. And of course, the thing that becomes the center of the world when there's no God is you. So this is just increasingly a problem for me as a teacher that my students are so narcissistic. Like 50% of them are almost unteachable at this point. Everyone knows best for themselves. Another way of looking at this, though, is that modern kind of consumer spirituality, like the average modern yoga studio, or these like luxury retreats in Bali, this is spiritual materialism, a term from this Tibetan Buddhist teacher. It's been around for a while, but I think we're really seeing this in the West. Certainly, middle class people don't, go and try and buy bling at the supermarket. They go on retreats, they do their spiritual practice, but there's a shallow quality to it. Zizek, who's a local boy for me here, he says that Buddhism, but what he really means is sort of new age secular mindfulness is the perfect religion for global capitalism. It helps people cope without actually really fundamentally changing anything. And often there are materialistic values hidden. Like one question I ask yoga friends is, if yoga made you fat and ugly, would you still do it? And if the answer is no, then it's not really, it's a materialistic practice, right? They're trying to get tight glutes or whatever. Yeah. And when I see like Buddhist statues in the garden center or whatever, I just find it hilarious at this point. Yeah. So we start to see sort of these sort of spiritual materialism practices, but also replacement religions. Like many others have pointed out that woke is a replacement religion. It has its sacred figures, like God, Robin DiAngelo here. God, she's demonic. There's the original sin, being a white man. There's these sort of sacred figures like George Floyd, this weird rituals of bowing down. This just weird. Actually, yeah. So other people, this is by Hagson is very good on this. It's got myths, it's got original sin, it's got the elect. I think Thomas Sowell talks about this, great historian. Taboos, speech taboos, you can't say certain things, purifying rituals. I mean, it's just a religion at this point. I think it's a little old hat in some ways. I think the real replacement religions of kind of consumer Western capitalism are love, but defined not in the Greek way broadly, but very narrowly, romantic love. Your romantic partner is supposed to fulfill the needs of community and spirit, and it's just way too much pressure to put on one person. Like what are most Hollywood films about? It's kind of attachment, really, in Buddhist terms, not really love. Sort of obsessive erotic attachment that's based on the individual level, and even happiness, right? It's like your own individual happiness, my happiness, the pursuit of happiness, my narcissistic individual happiness that doesn't involve surrender or service or community. It's just me, 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 me. So I would say, fuck love, fuck happiness. These are shallow words, replacement religions. And then also you see like hate speech, right? Anything's not love is hate. Highly politicized. Freedom would be another one. Our American friends, give us a yeehaw in the chat. Um, yeah, I mean, we love freedom in the West, of course, but it's like I think a mature spirituality acknowledges boundaries, it acknowledges rules, it has a certain surrender to it. This like immature freedom, not just freedom from, but freedom like I'll do what the fuck I want. Yeah, like fuck you, America. Like there's an immature version of freedom, which to me does have very little spirituality to it. It's interesting you see the left has this like moral superiority, but it's like I'm always like based on what? Like I see people sort of sneering at me and they mean like, I recycle or I'm a vegan. Yeah, sometimes. But it's like they're just putting themselves at the top of this moral pyramid, but just not really based on anything, or it's based on stuff that they can't control. Like if you're born gay or woman or whatever, like stuff they say is like, this is just me. That's why they'll start sentences with, as a black woman. It's like they're claiming this moral high ground, and it's not based on virtue. It's not based on how you invest in society, how you are moral, how you play it forward. I think there is such a thing as moral superiority. The problem is we're in almost a postmodern age that denies morality while insisting on it at the same time. It's very confused in the non-right-wing world. It's very confused. Far clearer in the right-wing world. It's like, here's how you're good. Like, let's say you're an Orthodox Jew, Orthodox, I don't know, Muslim. Here's how you're good. You do Ramadan, you pray 5 times a day. It's very clear. Yeah, very clear. So again, I'd say is it, the left tends to assert its spiritual and moral superiority by words, signals, essentially like virtue signaling. You change your Facebook status, you wear a pink hat, you shout a slogan, you hold a placard. I mean, it's like really, as opposed to actually embodying virtue. Jonathan Haidt is a guy in the bottom right corner. He actually said that, look, there's various traditional virtues, and the left pursues some of them, like justice, but not all of them. And the right spirituality tends to be sort of more broad in its virtuous rather than just, and I'd say clearly the key thing for me is the method of establishing virtue. Again, difficult in a postmodern age, but how would you answer the question, how am I good? What makes me good? How do I become better? How do I do good? If you don't have an answer to that, do you have a spirituality? You don't have an ethics, right? And it's sort of implicit in the left. And it's about saying the right things. I support the latest thing, and sometimes I do support the latest thing, but like, I'll give you an example. I'm very pro-Ukraine. I've got a lot of links there. I started a charity there. I was married to a Ukrainian. Of course, I'm pro-Ukraine, right? Every day I was on the phone to Ukraine yesterday, hearing horrific stories. And I'm still uncomfortable when I see how weird the media is about it. I was with my ex-wife walking around and I was like, look at all these Ukrainian flags. She's like, it's great and it's a bit weird, right? Signaling. She's like, these people don't even know where Ukraine is on a map, but thanks. Whatever it is. The latest thing is more about social prestige. And this is very feminine, right? It's very feminine that it's social prestige rather than virtue requires sacrifice. Generosity involves giving something away. That's, primary virtue of, say, Buddhism. Primary practice of Buddhism is dana, generosity. You lose something, you give something away, even if it's just a bit of rice to a monk. If I don't lie, that often involves sacrifice. I lose something, right? It's like, I get in trouble, whatever it is. This is a key thing that nothing's really being sacrificed there. It's not costing people anything to say, I'm anti-racism. It's like, yeah, so are all your friends. Like, what are you actually being brave about here? Where's the courage in this? All right, so this is a replacement spiritualities, right? We can say there's replacement spiritualities, whether it's woke or whatever. But what about the right? Let's be fair. On the right, I think we have some replacement spiritualities. Often I see this in football. I like watching football. I have my family are Liverpool supporters. They're currently top of the Premiership. You're welcome. If you're a Liverpool supporter, say you'll never walk alone in the chat. However, it's not a replacement tribe. There's all sorts of different nationalities in the football team, the national team now, but there's Southgate with the gay armband. Yeah, football's been a bit taken over, but it's a sort of replacement tribe. Tribe doesn't really mean anything. It's like go red team, go blue team. That's very, I mean, it's hard for me to say as a football fan, but it's like, what does it really mean? Like Liverpool players come from all over the world at this point. Yeah. Even nationalism, it's got its place. There's a healthy nationalism that I think's part of right-wing spirituality. But if it's just my country above all, like, is that really the most profound thing? Is it the most real? That's a spiritual question. What is most real? Is it the most profound? I mean, it's important. It's part of a spirituality, perhaps. I think that's fair. Tribe is fair, but it's not everything. Fitness, again, it becomes a religion to some people. The CrossFitters, they're almost like worshipping there. And love, I don't think we're immune to this idea of romantic love being a replacement religion. So let's be fair, right-wing people have replacement spiritualities too. Here's a question. Is there a left-wing spirituality at all? Right? So people, imagine any leftists watching this like, oh, well, right-wing spirituality, that's outrageous. Right-wing people are bad. There's this sort of moral superiority based on nothing. Um, so what we found though is people have to replace the spirituality. So like, for example, in Soviet Russia, and I spent a lot of time in the ex-Soviet countries, It was a sort of worship of Lenin and Marx. It was also the worship of the future. There was there was religious symbols, there was religious rituals. They had to replace a lot of things, like Christmas got replaced by the sort of New Year's ceremony in a certain way. But often the left is very materialistic. Marx explicitly was materialistic, so it's secular. It's about this world, right? So the Soviets said, "Well, we're making this world better," but it never quite satisfied people, which is why Christianity came back strongly in the 90s when after less well, a few generations of communism and Christianity still came back. Actually, my ex-stepfather, I'm trying to get this right, my ex-wife's dad used to have a cross like taped to his shirt underneath his like communist uniform, right? Still, even after like 50 years of communism. We could also say that like gratitude is the center of spirituality in many ways, and the left is always resentful, I find. They're resentful of the rich. As George Orwell, one of my favorite British leftists, said the socialists don't love the poor, they just hate the rich. And that resentment I see of white men, of the rich, whatever, it's core to the left. And that to me is a very anti-spiritual. Interestingly, like the disembodiment on the left as well. Like they're materialistic about the world, but they're not in their own bodies, which I find how can you be spiritual if you're not even rooted in reality of your own existence? They tend to be kind of utopian, though. I guess that has a spiritual side. It's interesting. They would regard non-hierarchical as more spiritual, like we're all equal as more spiritual. We'll see why that may not be the case shortly. What does it say at the bottom? Yeah, and the politics replacing religion throughout the time. So, we could make a case that the left isn't spiritual at all. Counter case, I mean, you could say like the left has a spirituality, sort of commies and hippies kind of go together, I guess. And then you'll see like a universalist spirituality, like we're all one, this idea. Liberation theology was a thing in South America, particularly. So you could make some cases of left-wing spirituality, but to me in the modern world, it seems pretty shallow. Equally, you could make a case that it's pretty satanic. Like you like I mean Marx and various other founders of communism. I was surprised when I looked into this. Feminism and communism. I thought it was like a whole right-wing conspiracy. Look it up. Look at the history. It's pretty shocking. A lot of them were explicitly Satanists. And certainly there's something demonic when you see like women screaming for the right to kill their unborn babies. It's hard to deny a sort of demonism in that. I mean, I've been quite skeptical about this for a while, but just increasingly that I just go, this is not even, they're not even fucking hiding it anymore. There's an anti-life quality. You see someone who chops their breasts off. I've said this before, but what does every color on the rainbow flag have in common is none of them reproduce. They're all non-white. Yeah, so none of them are white babies, right? They're all sterile, like, asexual. They don't reproduce, trans. They're chemically sterilized, and it's just something profoundly anti-life. And that goes right up to like encouraging women to be in the workplace and not raising their own children, putting their women in child babies in childcare. It's funny. Like I'm in Eastern Europe now, or well, ex-communist Europe, let's say, if not Eastern. And you see way more babies. You see way more happy families. You see way more fucking wholesome, normal life here compared to the West, where we've really embraced this weird leftist culture. And obviously, the ex-communist countries are pretty anti it. So, is there a left-wing spirituality at all? We could say. I find the left profoundly unspiritual in many ways, as someone who's studied major spiritual traditions. It seems demonic at this point, right? I remember when I used to go to Pride Parade in Brighton, and my ex-wife's bisexual, so I used to go with her. And I supported a lot of gay rights in Russia. I really put my ass on the line for that, and I still would, because in Russia there's violence, there's real problems there. There's people, I think people have a right to live their own life as long as they're not disturbing other people. And those pride parades over the years got increasingly gross to me. Now, I don't think that was just my politics changing. I saw increasingly extreme behaviors, unhealthy behaviors, over sexualization. They went from sort of feeling like a genuine celebration to feeling just odd and anti-life, frankly. So at this point, we could say, is right-wing spirituality just a wholesome approach to life? Is that all it is? Is it just not being anti-life? I think life is a one definition of spirituality we can get behind, that which nurtures and encourages all forms of life. So I think that's a fair question at this point. And obviously the memes are about this, right? Like it's not a flex to have loads of girls, it's a flex to have a healthy family. The sort of left encouraging single cat mothers, not healthy. I want to live on a farm. Like, this is the life I've chosen. My partner and I have really chosen to raise a family somewhere wholesome, close to nature, real values, whether it's going to church or just being around people with decent values. This is like every day I'm shocked at how nice normal Slovenia is. And Czechia was the same. I was at a wedding in Czechia, student's wedding last year, and it was just so normal and healthy. And their right-wing spirituality was family, food, togetherness, connection. It's so wholesome. And again, foreigners were welcome. They didn't hate black people or gay people. Yeah, so you'll see all the memes on this, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so one way I always say BMI, be more Italian. The Southern Europeans have taught me a lot about this. My partner's Italian. I've spent a lot of time in Southern Europe, Portugal, other places. And a lot of spirituality, I think, is just human connection, eating together, being together, could be singing together. Some of my African friends drum together. That's a lot of spirituality. It's just the communitas is the spiritual feeling that results from being together with other human beings, not in isolated individual consumer units. Brotherhood for men. A lot of men watch this channel. Shout out to the young guys. I think Jack Donovan's book on brotherhood and gangs is really helpful on this. And yeah, young men getting together, being able to get together. There's a spirituality in that can sometimes have an unhealthy, unpleasant effect, which is gangs who are violent and looking for meaning in a way that they, maybe our ancestors found in the war, for example, through fighting other people. I know some of my friends in Ukraine really find that togetherness is very spiritual for men, very spiritual. So, embodiment and health being spiritual, I've found that body is a gateway to spirituality, and certainly our sort of disembodied postmodern culture lacks that. Yeah, is spirituality just connecting most deeply to oneself? I think there's a case for that. I certainly dance my way into spirituality a lot of times, and in the gym, I really feel like a deep connection through the body into something bigger than me, right? So not limited to the material body. Beauty, I spend a lot of time in these beautiful cities, in beautiful nature. Just Google Slovenia nature. We do retreats here, by the way, if anyone's interested. And it's yeah, just there's a spirituality every time I walk along the river here in Ljubljana, every time I'm in Krakow, seeing beautiful traditional architecture. There's just so much beauty. Is it just nature connection then spirituality? Is it just aesthetic or bodily connection? Well, you've probably seen this before if you've been on my channel before. I think it's this connection. So we need four connections. This is the tetrarchy model of spirituality. I think it's a good model for right-wing spirituality. Generally, we need to put something above ourselves in the middle, right? Theoregulation is the idea that something more important than ourselves, a higher power, they call it in AA. Self-connection, I think, is important, the bodily connection without being self-obsessed. Then communitas is part of connection. And then eco-nexus, connection to ecology, is part of that. And divinity it's like a pomegranate, just goes through everything. These four connections, this is the best model I've developed over 20 plus years of working in terms of what keeps us sane, what keeps us happy, and what keeps life meaning. So this is what I would recommend. Yeah, yeah, and it's really what I've discovered is that spirituality is essential for human flourishing, as other groups have discovered, and they've tried to have their pseudo spirituality as a result. It's just what makes people well, I would say. So I don't think of spirituality or right-wing spirituality as like special thing necessarily. It's just what makes us well, whether that's eating a meal together, like brotherhood, family, beauty, all these things. Like a core right-wing approach to spirituality is just looking at tradition, right? So that's the tradition. And sort of Roger Scruton in the UK would be like a sort of very accessible, easy way into this. The idea that what's familiar even is spiritual. There's a deep home is a profound spiritual word, a very deep concept. Um, the idea of traditionalism, though, goes a bit deeper than that. Is also there's a philosophical sense. Martin Sedgwick's book's a good introduction. That we live in a spiritual hierarchy, that that there's a great chain of being, right? A great order, of being, the traditionalism. There's various speakers on this. King Charles apparently is influenced by some of them. On YouTube, you'll find the Lotus Eaters influence. Richard the Fourth's good on this. Dugin, not a fan of his politics, but certainly a good philosopher. Evola, if you want to go hardcore Italian. Mark said a good place to start. The idea that what came before wasn't just backwards, that actually we've devolved, not evolved in some way, that there's a chain of being, that there's a spirituality. It's kind of like hippie fascism would be the sort of joke way of talking about it. Yeah. Yeah, that the Enlightenment was actually a mistake. That we go back, and this doesn't just mean like back to the 50s. This might be back to prehistory. Yeah, certainly back to the Middle Ages at the very least. We can argue about how far to go back. Bronze Age pervert would say the Bronze Age, right? Like how far do you want to go? And there's a mythical quality to this. That the Enlightenment was more the endarkenment. It wasn't like we're all in the mud with eating fucking turnips like in Monty Python, that it was actually a destruction of our culture, not enlightenment. Yeah. The right though struggles with the word spirituality today. Why? Why do you think that is? A lot of it's just to do with trade openness. People on the right tend to have less trade openness, and that tends to be associated with spiritual experiences. Yeah. So I think that's one reason. We're just too busy getting on with work and not, taking drugs in the woods or whatever. So that's one reason. It's just like typologically, people on the right have a bit less of the spiritual experience. I'm kind of the exception in this way. I have a family talent, let's say, is why we have lots of schizophrenics, unfortunately, in my family. I have a family talent for openness. Yeah, the other reason is spirituality today is just fucking ridiculous. Samsara nightclubs, Zen marketing, the green juice, the green juice is somehow spiritual, yoga spiritual, spirituality celebrities. It's really silly at this point. I think right-wing people see how silly this consumer spirituality is. They see that sticking feathers up your ass doesn't make you a chicken. Um, I think there's sort of three main trends that can be off-putting. One is kind of like fundamentalism, right? Just like this is how it is. And now I'm big on the fundamentals. So I don't necessarily mean that literally, but that's like everything being literal, one way. There's only one way, and the certainty that comes with that is a kind of ontological fascism, right? Like I know the way. The second way is just kind of lame and weak. Like the Anglican Church in the UK is just lame and weak at this point. It's pathetic. It's a tea club. It's tea and cake. It's not a church. The other one is just the weirdness of hippies, just being a little bit too open and like talking about star signs or whatever. It just starts to seem silly. So most spirituality is either retarded, weak, or totally bonkers. So I think it's fair enough that people on the right are like, where do I begin with this? Yeah. It can just be cringe, right? You see like brands, Christianity stuff, and his tidy whities. It can just be cringe, or really hard to believe. If someone says to me the Virgin Mary was a virgin and Moses parted the Red Sea and the Earth was created in 6 days, I'm like, well, I can kind of believe that as a metaphor, but really, like in reality, like the Muslims believe certain things. I just, to me, I'm too modern for that. Like you can't go back. There's someone in the comments in another video saying, yeah, you can. It's like, no, you can't. You can't be non-rational. You can't believe things your ancestors believed because your brain structure's been changed. The whole culture's been changed. We have to be postmodern, meta modern, right? We can't just imagine, we can't cosplay as middle people from the Middle Ages. It's not gonna buy it. And I can be in church and pretend, but it's not authentic. But so we've gone through this sort of pre-modern version of spirituality. The book says it is, but then we're like, well, which book? Because I've got Hindu friends and Hindu colleagues, I've got Jewish friends, I've got Muslims in my family, right? It's like, whose book? All right. So the modern says, well, nothing's real, it's all just materialism, and that doesn't satisfy. So the postmodern says everything is real, everything is all good, baby, and there's no right, no wrong, and no truth. And okay, then we're just lost. We're just confused. So what the fuck do we do? Well, the integration of these three things is where I think a mature a right-wing spirituality will come from, an integration of these three aspects. So we take the tradition and ritual from the former, we take the rationalism of the modern, and we take the humor and the actual diversity of the postmodern. So what do you see with right-wing spirituality? It tends to either be pre-modern, like Jesus said. You see this in the comments, man. There's some dumb guys in the comments. Like everything is solved by Jesus. Really, everything. Does Jesus start your car in the morning? It's like science is still a thing, you know? Like to me, it's there's a jihadi kind of backwardsness that's no better than when I talk to a backwards Muslim or backwards Orthodox Jew. I'm sorry, but it's backwards, right? That's backwards is using a modernist frame, but I think there's something in modernism. There's some things we might want to take forward, yeah. Or you'll see that people can be really clever. So you'll see this meme of on the bottom, right? It tends to be the right-wing spirituality is either the dumb version or the really clever version. And sort of in the middle, the midwits tend to be more the sort of liberal left-wing spirituality. So this is Ken Wilber's pre-trans distinction, not trans as in transsexual, but trans as in transpersonal. Religion is very different. It's mystical, it's not just mythical. Yeah. Um, Yes, intuition comes back in, but it's incorporating intellect. Mind is incorporated into this. So the pre-trans fallacy is thinking they're the same thing, which is tends to be the mistake the midwit liberals make is they see a really advanced right-wing spirituality and think it's just like a fundamentalist, Orthodox Judaism or whatever. We are some of the most racist people I know, by the Orthodox Jews. Anyway, their views are utterly bizarre. I have to wear this vest. God demands I chop the end of my penis off. That's just weird, man. Okay, so you'll see this in the comments. You'll see both groups. You'll see the sort of fairly advanced people, at least thoughtful people. I don't agree with all the guys on the right, but you'll see, none of them are totally backward, right? Whereas Matt Walsh, he's a very logical guy, Matt Walsh, and he's funny. Rudyard, I mean, he's a pro and he's a good guy. He's a bit off the wall sometimes, but he's really thinking about these things. Thomas Sowell, well ahead of his time. Peterson, love him or hate him. He's trying to be more than modern. He's not just saying, believe the Bible. He's saying the Bible is a metaphor, blah, blah, blah. You'll see the trolls, you'll see the super religious people or the actually far right nationalists who are just not very smart sometimes. They're a smart nationalist, right? But it's like pre-trans fallacy. So the mythic is one way out of this. Peterson's attempt is, make the Bible stories a Jungian approach, and there's a lot of interest in that. Even Richard Dawkins, it's old atheist, saying he's a cultural Christian now. Like there's something there. Even he's acknowledging that. To me, this is useful, but it doesn't go far enough. I mean, this doesn't really satisfy. I've also noticed there's never a people or place element to it, right? This is acceptable by the mainstream because there's no sense of the people like the Slovenians. Yeah. You'll see people say they're spiritual but not religious, but Louise Perry and I are the only two people I've heard say this, being religious but not spiritual, right? It's like there are people out there who don't have this spiritual experience, like you can. I just do this to troll my friends, my hippie friends. But actually, religion has functionality that's separate from just spirituality, the more personal experience side of things. So, religion has places to access the divine. I mean, you can have a spiritual experience anywhere, but a church is useful. Real community. There's a narrative, ethical guidelines. Like, yoga had ethical guidelines, but how many yogis really follow them? How many can you get married? Like rituals, can you get married in a yoga studio? Can you have a funeral there? It's not a spirituality in that it's a spiritual practice, perhaps, but it lacks lacks the religious framework and holding. I think we need this. Like real spirituality is in the framework of religion. It isn't just a narcissistic me and my, personal thing. So the right is really good at ethics, particularly personal responsibility, but having rules, having the commandments, the five precepts in Buddhism. So right-wing people tend to be strong on that aspect of religion. I was going to say religion and spirituality. They have good traditions, rituals. They build institutions. The left doesn't build good institutions. Women don't build institutions. Real community. The right-wing people build real community, and that is a key part of spirituality. Yeah, so communities have norms. Let's go back to our Orthodox Jewish friends. They have norms, right? They have specific ways of dressing, sometimes a bit ridiculous, but they're there. They have boundaries. You can be kicked out of spiritual communities. You can be unmormoned. Yeah. There's a us and a not us. That's really important. Often my hippie friends like, we're such a community, and they're just not. They're just a bunch of people. Barriers to entry, like you literally have to cut the end of your dick off, right? And this is like Burning Man festival. What's the barrier to entry? It's just like having, what is it, $200, $300 to get in? There's no barrier to entry. It has to be difficult to get in, so you value it. There has to be a commitment to it, right? If you like join a real community, there's a serious commitment. It's like, if not lifelong, it's hard to leave. Yeah, and the service you give. And let's say this about, communities of Mormons or Jews or whatever. It's like there's a lot of service. Like a single mom won't starve. Like there's a woman who's her husband dies, right? In the Mormons or the Orthodox Jews, she'll be looked after. Yeah, it's a real beautiful sense of service within the community. It's ethnocentric as opposed to this pre-modern ethnocentric, but it's not inclusive in that way. But it's still a lot of service there. All right. Let's look at the possibilities then. So four big options coming up. One is Christianity, an obvious one. I think Orthodox and Catholicism are sort of making a comeback. Various celebrities. I think some like Putin are just pretending to be. The Russian church, by the way, can be just as corrupt as any other church I've come across. Who talks to my Russian friends about the monetary corruption in the Russian Orthodox Church, for example. So it's not like without problems. Certainly, Catholicism's problems are pretty well known. Um, yeah, but there's a call for a lot of people. There's a call for a lot of people, and there's various YouTube channels that are about this. This is two I recommend. Very good philosophical one, and a bit more sort of meme-worthy, Warhammer Catholic one. Some good ones. Is it right wing though? God wills it. Yeah, sometimes people portray Jesus as kind of a hippie, kind of a lefty who would want mass migration. I think it's complete nonsense. Nietzsche said there was a slave religion, it had this like Jewish slave religion quality. I think as long as Christianity is balanced with Greek arete, Greek friends, I know I'm saying that horribly, excuse me. As long, there's a Jesus, there's a muscular Christianity that's more right wing, as long as the Greek arete is balanced with the Christian. I mean, that was Western culture, a balancing of the Greek Roman excellence with the Christian equality, forgiveness. Yeah. So I say, there's a strong case. We could say there's institutions there, there's traditions there. So we could say it's right wing. Jesus wasn't a hippie. Like the continuous pushing of Christianity to the left is really obscene. It was really obscene. Yeah, lots of good stuff on YouTube if you want to go into people, Catholics and Orthodox going into that. So shout out to all my brothers in those faiths. I have a lot of close friends in both of those faiths. So don't hear a disrespect here, please. What is the but though? What is the but? Is it stale? Sometimes it feels stale. Yeah. Is it too literal? I've certainly seen YouTubers where I thought, okay, that's not going to fall well on a modern mind, a thinking person. Is it too exclusive? Like, does it like I do live in a multicultural world, like maybe less so where I am now, but certainly in London, like I've got friends from all different religions. Can we say that right-wing spirituality has to be Christian? Maybe it's just that we each have our tradition and that's fine, right? Like I don't have any problems with my Hindu colleagues. We just have our own traditions and holidays and we respect that. We're not trying to take each other over. I think it has been hijacked. I think maybe all the main churches, certainly Anglicanism is what I know most about, and it's certainly got very weak. Different denominations, though, are different there. I was in a nice Orthodox church here in Ljubljana the other day that didn't feel like it was hijacked or weak for sure. I had warrior saints painted on the walls. I think it was Greek Orthodox. So who knows? It potentially needs a new version. We potentially need a Christianity 3.0. We potentially need a new Christianity, which is taking into account some of the more postmodern truths in the same way as it had a reformation. Maybe it needs a second reformation. I think it's possible. I think we may well see a new variant of Christianity become the dominant religion and spirituality of the right over the next 10 years. That's my prediction. Islam, some people say, well, it's very right wing. Islam, certainly Prince the king likes it, and it's got it's strong. Islam is strong. They've got strong practices. They're multicultural. They can incorporate different people. They fast. They pray 5 times a day. It's hardcore, right? It's got some really strong warrior elements to it. Is it right wing? Well, it has this kind of weird unholy alliance with the left right now. It's certainly got some sort of medieval aspects, which again are pre-modern right wing. Yeah, it's very difficult to say if it's right wing or not. I mean, I think the key but here is it's not Western. So in the West, I just don't think it has a place. It doesn't have a historic here, and because it wasn't reformed, it can't really incorporate the modernity of the West. It could, genocidally destroy it, which is happening across Europe, sadly. But it can't actually integrate it, I would say. So unless Islam totally takes over the West, which is a possibility, unfortunately, I don't see it really being becoming the right wing spirituality of the West, separate from integrated with it. Next one, paganism. So obviously the West has strong pagan roots. You'll see this on the far right. Sometimes it's confused, right? Like that symbol in the middle, that wheel there. looks like the nasty German one, but actually is a Slavic one. It's totally different. Azov in Ukraine, I know people there, they have a very strong pagan spirituality, which is sometimes confused with other things. Sometimes it's genuine, though. Sometimes there is a genuine far right. What is the far right? What does it believe in? Ethnic superiority, violence, non-democracy. We have to define it if we're going to say something's far right. And sometimes paganism has that element. What I would say, though, is all paganism has an element of blood and soil, the connection of people and land, but so do all tribal people. Like this needs to be incorporated into a right-wing spirituality is place and people, right? And we don't have to go full 20th century German about it, but it has to be incorporated, place and people. And pagans do that. And this, by the way, if you're from the UK, this is not weird. Like I grew up at a village that had a harvest festival. We did maypole dancing. Obviously, it's Easter at the moment. That's a pagan festival, right? People have talked about this more knowledgeable than me. And sometimes it seems a bit hippy dippy, but I literally was living 25 minutes drive from Stonehenge until recently. These chalk guys on the hills, you see, this is part of normal life in England. So I think there is a case that this could be part of British life. They do rituals really well. If you've ever been to a naked pagan hand fasting, that's a lot of fun. Obviously, nature connection, cycles of the year. They do a lot of stuff really well. Could definitely be part of a right-wing spirituality. And I think Christianity's often incorporated a lot of this already. But it's kind of cringe, right? It can be kind of hippie. Maybe it feels, because it's pre-Christian, it feels like there's something missing for me. Though I do like paganism a lot. I think it definitely fits with the right. What about something else? So this is our fourth option. I think people might start worshiping AI. Really, that's possible. We might have some kind of like space Jesus, some kind of Christian. I think there could well be some form of updated Christianity. Like if somebody does that well, that could be the answer. I think it's the most likely answer because of the heritage of Christianity, but some kind of update may be needed. It's a return tradition, but at the same time, an advance forward. It has to be both of those things. People are really trying to do integral spirituality. John Vervaeke, Ken Wilber, Roger Walsh. There's three. There's many more. Looking at what Wisdom 3.0, as Jamie Wheel talks about, what does an integrated, philosophically sophisticated, like neurologically sophisticated, really meta-modern approach to spirituality. People are trying to do that, but it's very hard to work out logically because it's one of those things that tends to evolve rather than get planned. We will see gurus rise up. I think, Peterson could have started a cult by now if he wanted to. Brand probably would, given half the chance. We will see, like, a lot of what this comes down to is, and this is certainly not my fucking role, but if someone charismatic, wiser than me, more charismatic than me, someone more knowledgeable than me, all those things, if someone had those and they would put themselves forward, they could really start a whole new right wings. I think we're ripe. We're really ripe, and this is dangerous and an opportunity. I hope it doesn't become an awful cult. I hope it doesn't become genocidal, but I think we are ripe for a right-wing spirituality that young men could get behind. And people say this is crazy, but like, look at my video on the Civil War. Cromwell was in charge of a tiny minority of Protestants who were the very extreme Protestants who actually founded a whole new government, right? So this can happen. Yeah. Also, we're seeing containment about this. What is the containment? There's this podcast, right? By the way, podcasts these days are often sponsored. If you see a podcast with nice production values, it's not YouTube that's paying their bills. I've been on podcasts where I've actually found out, oh, there's some rich right-wing guy or rich Israeli or whatever paying the bills. The mainstream media really hates any kind of idea of right-wing spirituality. There's this god-awful podcast called The New Gurus. It came out from BBC Podcast. Beautiful production values, really well put together. Awful presenter, sort of like a girls' school prefect of a presenter. I forget her name. She interviewed Peterson as well. Very forgettable woman. Probably got cats. She basically said anyone giving opinions on the internet is a guru, and particularly anyone who's any right leaning. I think the sort of gloves are off now in the culture wars. People are really seeing that the liberal death cult we're in is heavily suppressing things, heavily suppressing things. All right, last little bit of time. Let's see if we can keep this simple. What would a right-wing spirituality look like? How about just embracing the good, the true, and the beautiful? We all kind of know what's good. We have a conscience, it's embodied. returning to the fact that some things are true and not just lies, right? And some things are beautiful. Beauty is divinity shining through things. You see that in a beautiful baby, in a beautiful woman, a beautiful city. You see that everywhere. Yeah. So if we just return to that classic Greek distinctions, we'd have a great right-wing spirituality. That could be enough. Yeah. Just those changes. Goodness, truth, beauty. Fucking simple. What about connection? Just this model of connection, I think, is sound, saying, let's just, if I can't become Christian again or whatever, maybe I just connect. Connect to what? These four things. Simple. Maybe we go back to life. We say, you know what? Let's just do life. What brings life? Is it really life to allow my daughter to chop her breasts off because she's confused right now? What brings life? Good food, good company, good music. Like, what brings life? That is a beautiful, wholesome approach to spirituality. Let me get really practical. If you're maybe a young guy, right leaning, watching this, going, well, I want some spirituality, but I don't know where to begin. Get some friends who are into it. Start praying or meditating. Most people can do one of those two things. Just give it a try. Go to spiritual places, whatever that is for you, whether that's the synagogue or the church, whatever, and spend more time in nature. Do those four things. I guarantee you will develop a spiritual life. This is the key thing. You just need to believe in something bigger than yourself and being open to that, being open that you're not the center of the universe, because how's it working out for you if you're putting yourself in the center, right? Just being open to something more is the start. Can you return to the religion of your ancestors, your parents, your grandparents, or is it too toxic? For some of us, it's too toxic, too much trauma. We just can't go back. But I think I agree with Jung. If you can, it might be beneficial. Yeah, and I've seen people just, you know what, I'm just going to go sit in the church every day and quietly for 5 minutes before I do anything else. Like maybe that's an opening. I'd say getting healthy is a good start to spirituality because it's like that's your base, right? And it's much easier to access spirit if you're reasonably well. So I don't sound like your mom, but get a good night's sleep, exercise, eat apples, blah, blah, blah. And some of the things not to do, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I don't feel more spiritual when I've been on porn, social media, when I'm around fucking toxic friends, drinking substances, eating fucking, smoking weed, drinking alcohol. I don't feel more spiritual around any of that. So maybe this is about what not to do. Psychedelics can be useful, though, if you've got mental health problems, you might want to avoid it. Done occasionally in ritual, obviously legally in Amsterdam if you're watching this in the UK. I'd say not weed. I think I've never seen anyone get more spiritual from weed. Certainly occasional psychedelic use done carefully if you're not, as I said, there are risk factors and things to avoid. Set and setting really matters, but can be very helpful. Certainly something I've found helpful over the years. And there's different types of people, right? There is different types of people. So you'll see that some of us are drawn to the spirituality of just serving, like, volunteer at a soup kitchen. Some of us is more intellectual. There's a kind of spirituality that actually comes through the mind. Some of us is more physical. For me, that's the case, martial arts, yoga, dance, like weightlifting. Some of it's more like devotional. I'm not devotional, but I've had girlfriends who would like really like put flowers at the feet of the Hindu statue. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. Like Indian culture supported that for them as well. What's the doorway? Ultimately, it's like, is there a doorway to spirituality for you? What's the safest doorway? What's the most sustainable doorway? These are also interesting questions. What is a doorway to spirituality for you? Like I think we need to have some humility here. Like anyone who's on YouTube, and I've researched this like literally at 15. I went to Israel for the first time. It's, with Jewish friends. At 16, I went to India, learned yoga and meditation. Like, my whole life, I've been studying this, but I hope I didn't come across as like this one way. Like I feel like we have to find our own way. And that's the horror of postmodernity and the opportunity of postmodernity is that we actually have space and time and actual options there. That's why it's tricky, rather than retreat to fundamentalism, to premodernity. But we should have a humility around this and be very careful of anyone who's selling you like the solution to spirituality. This is how everyone should be. Yeah, so there's the God wills it. Subscribe if you haven't already. That's definitely what God wants. What is right-wing spirituality? Connection, life, wholesome sanity. That's the best answer I've got for now. Cheers, guys.